Growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, there was one thing I loved to do, and that was to go to the circus. The Barnum and Bailey three-ringed circus. I loved going to the circus, especially with my godfather, Alan Warren. And there's one thing I loved about the circus. I loved the lions, the tigers, and the bears, but I especially loved the elephants. But I always got nervous, especially sitting on the front row with these elephants, these large, massive animals. And I was always worried that there was going to be some type of elephant coup d'etat that would happen right there on the front row. And I asked my godfather, why is it that the elephants are able to do all of these things, but they do not escape? They are much stronger than the trainers. And my godfather said something very interesting to me. He said that they have become comfortable with their captivity, that literally their leash has been the limitation on their ability to grow because fear, the politics of fear, have been introduced into the spirit of the animals. And as a result of that, they will always stay in place, never moving outside of where they have been dictated that they should operate. The politics of fear was operating within these particular animals, and as a result of the politics of fear, they stayed in one particular place. And as I grew up, I began to realize that the most dangerous type of domesticated animal is one that has nothing to lose. Fear, in the words of Howard Thurman, is the one thing that dogs the footsteps of the oppressed by pressing their backs against the wall. For when the spirit of fear operates within a human being, we are locked into a particular cycle or a pattern or a behavior. And when we look at a particular text in the 7th chapter of Kings, in the beginning with verse 3, we see that there are 4 lepers. These 4 lepers were operating under the spirit of fear. They believe that if they stay where they are, they will die. If they move into the city of Samaria where there was a famine, they will die. But one of them made the decision to say that, well, what do we have to lose if we go into the enemy's camp? We cannot be paralyzed by our fear. And that becomes the perennial question for us in this day and age. Are we going to be paralyzed by our predicament and paralyzed by our fear? Lepers, people who are second-class citizens, lepers who had a skin condition, they would not be paralyzed by their fear. They made the decision that they were going to determine their own destiny by making a decision not to be locked in by fear. It is Rabbi Hillel who makes the statement that every morning we wake up, the scales are equally balanced between good and evil. What we do during the day will determine where the scales fall. And that is the question for us. What are you going to do this day? Will you be paralyzed by fear? Will you live in the comfort of your captivity? Or will you move from the level or place of your comfort and move into a unique area? We cannot be paralyzed by fear. There is a story that I love to hear and a story that I want to share with you, a story that was passed on to me by my father. Growing up in LaGrange, Georgia, he tells the story of a gentleman. It was the first opportunity that he had to preach in a small country church. I believe it was Mount Olive Baptist Church in LaGrange, Georgia. And this young seminarian stood before the people, had all of his notes put together so beautifully, and was ready to preach. But of course, back then they did not have any type of AC, so all of the windows were open. And a nice, beautiful breeze came in and blew away all of his notes. He did not know where he was in his sermon. He did not know exactly what to say. I think the only thing that he could say was, "Ain't he all right? Ain't he all right? Ain't he all right?" And of course, everybody was kind of bowing their head, just praying for this young man. But there was an elder saint who kept on saying, "Go ahead, preach it. That's right. Say it." And everybody in the church knew that he was not saying much of anything. So immediately following the service, after everybody left, he decided to find this elder saint and go up to her and speak to her and say, "Now, you know that my notes went everywhere." And she said, "Yes, baby, I saw that." "You know that I wasn't making any sense." She said, "That was absolutely true, that you were not making any sense." And so the young man said, "Then why were you encouraging? Why were you shouting the entire time as if I had an incredible sermon?" And she smiled and looked back at him and simply said this, "Just because you didn't do your job doesn't mean I'm not going to do mine." All of us have a job to do. We cannot be paralyzed by fear. And in this country and in this day and age, it is our duty to transform and change our condition and the condition of other people. We have nothing to lose.